Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. Today I'm actually in my car, but I've got some free time and it's such good lighting that I was like, this is the perfect time to film a video, and I've actually managed to like prop up the phone, so hopefully you don't fall off halfway through. Last night I spent ages on Goodreads because every time I need a new book to read, I would spend ages on there scrolling through books that I've got marked as to read. I literally just love spending time on Goodreads. So I thought, why don't I just go through my Goodreads today and go through books that I've read and compare them against their average rating. It'd just be really interesting to see what Goodreads says is the best compared to what I think is the best. Basically telling you whether these highly rated books on Goodreads are worth reading, in my opinion. I've got a coffee. I'm just gonna have a little drink first of all. That's so nice. I got a chai latte with soy milk though. Right, let's get started. I've got my read list here and I've done it by average rating, so it's telling me the ones that are rated the highest first. The first book on here I've actually read really recently. It's Know My Name by Chanel Miller. This book I feel like is so important. It's the story of the girl who was assaulted by Brock Turner on Stanford University grounds. She at first was just known as Emily Doe. They didn't release her name while everything was going through court. Then a couple of years ago she came out with this book which basically tells everything from her point of view. Just the effect that it had on her, the effect that it had on her family, even small things. She became so much more sensitive to comments from men who would like walk past and catcall her. And obviously that's like a horrible thing anyway. Like that just makes me feel like so gross. She just started to realise how often that happens because she was like hypersensitive to it. Just things you wouldn't even think of. It was so emotional, so well written. Obviously maybe think about trigger warnings, that kind of thing. It's literally incredible. I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. I think everyone should read it. So I'm off to a good start. I'm agreeing with Goodreads there. Okay, so some of these I feel like I don't need to talk about as much. The second one on here is A Court of Thorn and Roses, the second book. Just in case anyone hasn't read ACOTAR or A Court of Thorn and Roses, it's a fantasy surrounding this like fae world. This girl ends up involved in this other realm that she didn't know existed. I have not finished this series. I read the first 2 books and this is one series where I feel like I was ahead of the curve. I remember just randomly finding the first couple books in the library when no one had talked about them, like no one seemed to know what they were. I read them and then kind of forgot about them, and then the last few years they've just blown up, and that's like the one series where I'm like, oh, I read that like before everyone else did. I'm gonna reread them and I think I might vlog it. It'd be interesting to see what I thought back then and now, because I've actually rated it 3 stars. So younger me thought it was okay, but not amazing. Next we've got 6 of Crows. This one is fantasy as well. It's basically a group of they're like a gang almost, like teenagers. They're trying to pull off this really deadly heist. So many people love this one. Obviously it's up there and everyone goes on about the romance in it. But for me, I only gave this 3 stars. I wasn't bowled over. I don't know whether that's because I'd heard so much about it beforehand that my expectations were too high. It was okay, but it wasn't amazing for me. Not quite on the same page as Goodreads with that. Next, Broken Kingdom, which is the 4th book in the Royal Hearts Academy. I loved this series. I didn't expect it to be as good as it was. It focuses around different people in the same family. First book is like childhood friends to enemies to lovers. This one is the 4th book. Oh, there's people next to me. Shouldn't be embarrassed. Embarrassment is only in your head. What is that quote? It's like, no one can make you feel embarrassed without your permission. Something like that. Okay, I'm going on. So it's different people in the same family. They're all teenagers. They are at school. I just found the series really heartfelt. It wasn't just a high school romance without any substance to it. This one especially had a really interesting trope, which I hadn't read much about, and I don't want to say it anymore because I don't want to give it away. But I would recommend this whole series. I gave that 4 out of 5. Next we've got The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. It goes through this woman's like the whole of her life, through all the husbands, through literally like the 50s when she first becomes an actress to like the 80s. Such a touching story, really well written. I can see why that's up there. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. I probably would have given it 4.5 if I could. Kingdom and Flesh and Fire, 2nd book in the Blood and Ash series by Jennifer L. Armentrout. Love this series so much. It's fantasy, enemies to lovers, focused around a girl, Poppy, who's a maiden. So she's not meant to be touched, she's not meant to be interacted to in the society in which she lives. It's enemies to lovers. Can't wait for the next book to come out. The next book is coming out in March and I'm desperate for it to come out. I gave that 5 out of 5. Next, we've got Sentinel. I don't actually know how you say that, but it's the 5th book in the Covenant series, again by Jennifer L. Armentrout. This one I gave 4 out of 5 stars. I used to be very strict with what I gave 5 stars to. Now I give 5 stars to a lot of books, but in my head, like, I keep a note of, there's probably about 4 or 5 which stand above the rest. I have actually downloaded a new app called Storygraph, similar to Goodreads, and with that you can give them 0.25, 0.75. So that's better. I'm going to start using that more. This one is fantasy. This one is enemies to lovers as well. It's a world in which the gods can come into human form. And you follow this girl called Alexandria. There's a bit of a love triangle between the guy that was her trainer in the first book and then another guy called Seth, who does end up having his own series, which I haven't read yet. It's basically demons, gods, fantasy, going into the underworld, those kind of vibes. Young adult, I would say, as opposed to new adult. Get that one 4 out of 5 stars. Next, Where the Crawdads Sing. This is one of my favourite books of all time. I love it. I gave it 5 out of 5, so I agree with Goodreads that it should be up there. Bit of a different one. It follows a young girl called Kaya. She lives out in the marsh, lives there alone because one by one her family have either died or gone away. Then you're flashing back and forth in time between her growing up and in present day, where a body's been found, someone's been murdered, and they're trying to find out who's done it. Very emotional, quite a few twists and turns. It just kept me gripped. I don't know what it was about it, but it kept me gripped the whole way through. Oh, and it's actually becoming... It's either a series or a film, and it's got the main girl from Normal People as Kaya. So I'm very excited to watch that. Next, we've got Liar, the 2nd book in a series called Madison Kate. That's the name of the main girl. This one was a bit different. It was the first reverse harem or harem book that I read, which is basically where there's more than one love interest. Like, there's lots of sex scenes. So it's not for everyone. But I just felt like this was really well done. Character development was there as well. I gave this 4 out of 5 stars. Next, we've got Full Tilt and All In. I was really surprised by these. They really did live up to expectations, and especially the 2nd book. I actually enjoyed the 2nd book more than the first. In the 1st book, you follow Casey. She is not dealing well with life on the road, traveling with her band. She's got a really bad relationship with her parents. Everything's just getting on top of her. I can't really talk about the 2nd book without giving away what happens in the 1st. It's just beautiful. Both of them are really well written romances. I gave that 4 out of 5, but I would actually rate the 2nd book higher. Next, we've got It Ends With Us by Colleen Hoover. I feel like this is the book of the moment. So you're following a girl called Lily, and you're going back and forth in between the guy that she has met in present day called Ryle and her first love, Atlas. I think a lot of people say it's also women's fiction. There's other themes going on which I can't say much about because they will spoil it. I put it as 4 stars. I'd agree with Goodreads, should be up there. Next, we've got Legendborn. To be honest, I was expecting a bit more from this. I did enjoy it. It's fantasy. It's about a girl. She starts at university and she suddenly realises that there's more going on than meets the eye. She ends up joining a society and realises that she's been destined to join it all along. She meets a guy who is kind of trying to show her the ropes. It's all to do with like magic, Merlins, that kind of world. It was very, very good representation. I gave it a 4 stars, but looking back, now that I've read over the other books in this list, I'd probably give it slightly less. Next, we've got Song of Achilles. Now, I feel like if you haven't heard of Song of Achilles, I'm surprised. It's a Greek mythology retelling of Achilles and Patroclus. I think that's how you say their names. It's one of those books where I just feel like it has to be up there, regardless of if I enjoyed the story or not, just for like the iconic sentences that are in there. You feel like it's such a good piece of literature. I feel proud to have read it because I'm like, I feel like that's going to be a classic in the future. And then for it to also have a really good story as well is a bonus. It's quite a slower one, I would say, but like a slow, deep one. I gave that 4 out of 5 stars. Next, we've got Ray Bearer. This one I was disappointed with, you know, because it had such good reviews, such good ratings, and I only gave it 2 out of 5 stars. It just didn't grip me. It was fantasy. It's about these children who, from when they're younger, they get picked to be on like a council to rule the society that they're in. They all have different powers, and it's their friendships within that society. To be honest, I can't remember much else because when I don't really enjoy a book, I kind of let it leave my head. Next, we've got This Is Going to Hurt by Adam Kay. So this is a non-fiction book. It's about a doctor working in the NHS, the National Health Service in England, from literally like the good times to the bad times. And it's really good because it's written in really short sections. So some of the sections are literally half a page, or they might be a couple of pages long. So it's good if you just want something quick to pick up and read. I feel like it was an important read because it gave you such a good insight into what it's like to work in a hospital, like how hard it can be. I came out with such a great appreciation for doctors, and this has just been made into a series. It's literally just come out. I'm excited to watch that. Next we've got The Book Thief. I read this so long ago that I really can't remember much about what it's about. I know it's like a young girl in wartime. To be honest, I don't want to say much more because I'm just going to get the story wrong, but I remember loving it at the time and I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. Next we've got From Luke Off With Love. I'm on a bit of a Mariana Zapata roll at the minute. Like, I'm reading so many of her books in a row. I read Culty not too long ago, and I can't wait to talk about these when I do a little wrap up of like all the books I've been reading recently. But this was so good. She does slow burn Enemies to Lovers impeccably. You are literally waiting the whole book for them to even interact or like acknowledge each other, really. Like, they start out absolutely hating each other, and by the time you get towards the end and they're actually starting to like each other, like, you've waited so long that it makes it so sweet. Like, it is just so good because you've waited so long for it. And I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. This one is set around 2 ice skaters, and I also feel like in this one, just the conversations with the main girl's family were some of the best bits of the book. Like, she just wrote the family dynamics so well. It was really funny to read. Next, we've got the second book in the Rejects Paradise series by Sheridan Ann. This is another series that I didn't expect it to be so good, and I just really, really enjoyed it. It's about a girl who, she moves into the house of this really rich guy and his son because her mum becomes the new housekeeper. It's so removed from her previous life. The son of the house is like horrible, like he doesn't want her living there. I just really enjoyed this series. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. Next, we've got Last Sacrifice, which is the 6th book in the Vampire Academy series, which was one of my favourite series of all times when I read it. Like, I read it when I was younger. I've read it a couple times since because it just doesn't get old. Centres around a young girl called Rose, and she goes to this academy because she's training to be a bodyguard for her best friend, and they're fighting the baddies of the world, are like these horrible vampire creatures. There's enemies to lovers, relationships, kind of teacher-student as well. Rose as a character, the main girl, is just so headstrong. Like, she will just say her mind, she'll get into fights. She was like that, and I still loved her. I love this series so much. Oh, I want to read it again. It makes me so sentimental, like, just thinking about it. The books, they're so huge, and I used to get through them in like a day. And they've got spin-off series as well, so if you're looking for some books to keep you going for a while, Vampire Academy, 5 out of 5. Archer's Voice, Mia Sheridan. Emotional. A girl moves to a new town because of like her traumatic past. There's this town loner who no one speaks to, no one likes him, and she starts interacting with him and starts to form friendship with him. It's really good. 4 out of 5 stars. And The Simple Wild. I love this one so much. It's a girl, she has a non-existent relationship with her dad, basically. And then this happens really early on, but she finds out that her dad is really ill and she wants to go and spend time with him to make up for lost time. But he lives in Alaska, literally in the middle of nowhere. So she goes there. She's a real social media kind of girl, a bit of a princess almost, or that's what everyone else thinks of her. And she meets a guy. It's proper enemies to lovers. Yeah, 5 out of 5 for that one. Next, Letters to the Lost by Bridget Kemmerer. She's written one of my favourite fantasy series. This one is about a girl. She's lost her mum. Her mum has died, and she writes letters to her mum and leaves them on like her gravestone in the cemetery. And then she realises that someone is replying back to her letters and she has no idea who it is, and then they start to form this communication through these letters. It's a young adult romance. I gave that 5 out of 5. November 9 by Colleen Hoover. This one I'm slightly in disagreement with Goodreads. I did really enjoy it, but I only gave it 3 out of 5 stars. For me, there was so many twists and turns in it, kind of became like a little bit unrealistic. I don't know. I really enjoyed like the premise of the story, which is that these two people who meet one day, meet the day before they're like moving to different sides of the country, and they decide to keep in touch and basically come back and meet on that same day, November 9th. Every year. I really liked that idea. I did find the book touching, but yeah, only 3 out of 5 stars for me. Didn't quite get me as much as some of Colleen Hoover's other books. Culty by Mariana Zapata. Slow burn, enemies to lovers, teacher student, sports romance. Loved it. Broken Trust, which is by Jamie and Eve. To be honest, I kind of get a few of these books confused because there was a time when I read so many similar books around the same time. I was really in a phase of reading books where a girl went to a new university or a new high school, and then there's like the group of bad guys that like aren't very nice to her, and their ringleader is the one that she kind of ends up having a relationship with. So that's kind of what this one is. Next we've got The Hunger Games. Everyone knows The Hunger Games. I love them so much. It's one of my guilty pleasure films. Not even guilty. I'm not even guilty about it. I love watching that. I love watching Divergent. I love the scenes where they're like preparing to fight and like getting stronger. And I always watch that and I'm like, oh, I want to go to the gym. Yeah, I just love watching them. Next, All the Light We Cannot See. I've read this really recently. It's set in wartime and you follow a young French girl and a young German boy. And you know that their paths are going to cross at some point, but you don't know when. Really, really well written. But I wanted there to be more romance. I'm a slut for romance and that wasn't enough for me. Next, we've got Him by Serena Bowen and Elle Kennedy. I love all the books that they write together. I think they're a really good set of authors. This is a hockey romance about two boys that were friends when they were younger. Then something kind of happened between them. Things became awkward after that. They haven't really spoken since. And then they end up back at the same hockey camp and they're both teaching there. Yeah, it's a good like exploration of their romance, what they're feeling, seeing it develop. It was really nice, really cute read. So yeah, that was all of today's books. I find it really interesting to compare what Goodreads says, what other people think compared to what I think, because I actually do take that into account when I'm deciding what to read next, and I think I need to do that less, because I'll always go on a book and then I'll see a couple of bad reviews or it hasn't got at least like a 4 rating and I'm like, okay, no. And I should ignore that really, because like there's quite a few on here where I haven't given it a good rating when Goodreads has, or people on Goodreads haven't enjoyed it and I have. So I think it just shows we all like different things and that's okay. But yeah, that is how my ratings compare to some of the books on Goodreads that I've read. Yeah, let me know if you've read any of them or if you agree or maybe you disagree with what I said about some of them. And yeah, I hope you're all having a lovely week and I will see you in the next one. Bye!